book writer, and today we're going to be talking about some recent things that have been going on in the author community. We're going to talk about similar book titles and what's been going on with Nora Roberts and Tomi Adeyemi. The situation with Tomi Adeyemi and Nora Roberts comes from the fact that both of them have very similarly titled books. Tomi Adeyemi's book, Children of Blood and Bone, was released first before Nora Roberts' book of Blood and Bone. They both have very similar book titles, and Tomi Adeyemi didn't quite appreciate that. She went on to her Twitter and posted a comment about how Nora Roberts was essentially copying her and how she wished that other authors wouldn't try to ride each other's coattails. Nora Roberts does not use Twitter, so she didn't know of this comment until people had seen Tomi Adeyemi's comment on Twitter and were very upset with Nora Roberts, thinking she must be trying to ride the coattails of Tomi Adeyemi's recent success. Tomi Adeyemi is a debut author, which means she just published her first book and it took off tremendously. When I eventually release my first book, it would be amazing to have that kind of success. I know that's not the norm for authors, but that is definitely the dream. So for her, that is wonderful news. Now, Nora Roberts, on the flip side, has been around for years. She wrote over 200 books, and she is a well-known household romance name. She has definitely become very famous and well-known, and is pretty much in probably every household at this point. Nora Roberts eventually talking to Tomi Adeyemi about the situation because she was like, okay, I am not copying you. So she talked to her about it, and they both understood that the intention was never to copy Tomi Adeyemi, one, because she didn't know who she was before this whole controversy started, and two, because she had titled her book in advance with her publisher's knowledge, and this was going to be a new installment to a series she had been writing in the past. So she already titled her book before she even knew Tomi Adeyemi existed as an author, and before Tomi Adeyemi's book was even released. So once both authors came to that understanding, the situation should have been resolved there. However, Tomi Adeyemi never took down her Twitter post, so her following continued to send Nora Roberts some backlash and anger and accusing her of stealing, and so Nora Roberts eventually made a blog post about the situation where she said that, and I will leave a link to her blog post below, that she did not need to ride any author's coattails because she has written 200 books of her own. She couldn't believe that she was being accused of stealing and that she didn't need to be taking from a debut author. Now, I think some of her comments seemed a little harsh and I think a little unprofessional. However, I also think that Tomi Adeyemi's initial tweet was unprofessional and that the two ladies could have talked it through on their own without the use of social media or their following to solve the situation.
Tomi Adeyemi did eventually issue an apology to Nora Roberts, as well as taking down her initial post after receiving much backlash from her writing community for not taking down the post after they initially spoke.
That said, there is ongoing debate about book titles and their similarity. A similar situation happened this year with Felina Hopkins, the author of a romance series with the title Cocky. I don't remember the exact titles of her books other than it's Cocky something, so if there's a Cocky anyone, it's definitely been written by her. Felina Hopkins eventually found out that other authors were using Cocky in their title as well, and I guess she must have found out someone was confused between one of her books and a book by another author with a very similar title. She went to the trademark office to establish her Cocky brand. When she got her trademark approved for Cocky to be her name on all romance novels, meaning that no other romance author could use the word Cocky in the title of their book, she received backlash from the entire author community as being a gatekeeper of words. The community was very upset with her for taking away their opportunity to use the word cocky in their title since that point. The situation could have eventually solved itself. She was just trademarking the name of her book and her brand and basically making sure that no one was confused. It could have ended there, however, she decided to start sending cease and desist letters not only to people who wrote books with the word cocky after her trademark came out, which is totally legal and fair, But she decided to also send it to people who had written their books before she got the trademark, with the word cocky in their title. So she was sending cease and desist letters to people who did not need to remove cocky from their books. However, she was saying she would take them to court. And she was adamant about making sure she was the only author who could ever use the word cocky in their romance novels, which is a pretty prominent word for romance novels, especially in the erotica subgenre. She received a lot of backlash from authors from that. A lot of authors were angry with her for taking away their right to use that word, and eventually she ended up relinquishing her right to her trademark because other authors who had the word cocky in their titles before she did eventually banded together because they had it first. And they decided they did not want to trademark theirs, so the word cocky ended up being open for everyone to use again. Now, my opinion on trademarks I will say in a moment because I want to make sure this is still recording. So now we're going to get into the opinion part of titling your books, where I discuss what I think about the situations and how it could be handled in the future. So reasons for trademarking the title of your book are that you want to establish a brand for yourself. Now, I understand that, being a person who studied mass communications and got a degree in advertising and public relations, so I understand the importance of building a brand. However, with books, it's a little bit different because there are other things that also establish your brand. Your name, for example, your author name or pen name, whatever name you decide to put on all of your books, is essentially your brand. I think that with that in mind, if you title a book similarly to another author's, your readers are probably very bright since they're reading your books to begin with. If they can pick up your book and see your name on the title, they will know that your book is different than, let's say, Nora Roberts' book. I think that authors are kind of underestimating their readers when they start getting angry about this and say that their readers are going to get confused, because readers may be initially confused, but they're smart enough to do their own research. And they're smart enough to know that your name is not the same name as someone else. Nora Roberts sounds nothing like Tomi Adeyemi. In fact, they don't even write the same genre. Even though their titles are very similar, they're not the same books. Authors need to take that into consideration when debating this, because readers are pretty damn smart. Now, I also understand the point of trademarking a name in a book because sometimes there's more than one author in a series. When that happens, I also say that readers are pretty damn smart. If your reader is going to read your series where you have more than one author, I think they're going to want to do the research to find out what authors are writing that series. And when they do that, then they'll know not to pick up with a different author's name on it. I understand the entire point of branding, and I understand wanting to eliminate confusion, which is the entire point of having a trademark office to begin with, to protect a brand and eliminate confusion between two different brands. However, when it comes to things like books, I think that books are different. There are different ways to go about it, and that there are different things that also help to distinguish one book from another. I think that the argument that people are going to get confused with books is a little bit insulting to readers, because I think readers can do their own research, find out who's writing what book, and if they're confused because they see a book with the same title and a different author, then they can look at the blurb, they can look online, they can do any kind of research they can to find out why these two books sound the same but have different authors on them. I do think we need to give more credit to our readers. We just shouldn't be petty, because honestly, the only reason I can think of for being upset with this, other than branding, and we know that the branding thing isn't really an issue because there are different author names, is that you're just upset someone else had the same idea as you for a title. So what? It's one thing to do something like Harry Potter, which J.K. Rowling definitely came up with. He is her brand. So with a book like Harry Potter, it makes sense to trademark it because it's become a huge franchise, and she needed to keep other people from using Harry Potter as riding coattails. But when it comes to the words of blood and bone, or cocky, there are so many books out there with very similar titles. Tomi Adeyemi and Nora Roberts' case between Children of Blood and Bone and Of Blood and Bone are not a unique case. There are other books out there. If you do your research, if you look on any search engine, anything at all that has a list of books, and look up Blood and Bone, you will find hundreds of titles with the words blood and bone, together and separate. It's not a unique case. Tomi Adeyemi was not really original with her title. She didn't really have a claim on that title to begin with. A lot of book authors who come up with titles come up with very unoriginal titles with this similar format. And that format is word, of, word, and word. It's very simple to come up with a book that sounds interesting with that format because you're including 3 interesting words. Children of Blood and Bone, the title, is probably just as interesting as House of Sand and Fog, which follows the same exact structure. And I'm sure if you look at your bookshelf right now, you'll probably find another book that follows the same exact structure.
In fact, I've come up with 6 more examples of books that follow this exact same structure.
And there is a thing going around. It's a little graphic where, you know those funny graphics that you find online where it says to take your birth month, your birthday, or the first letter of your first and last name, and then it gives you a list of different things to come up with your name of something. Well, there's something like that to name the title of your next young adult novel. And it follows the same exact structure that I'm talking about here, where you come up with the title of the book that has something of something and something. The fact that they even came up with something like that shows that the way that authors now title their books tends to not be very original. So you can't really get mad at another author for coming up with a title that's similar to yours if you're not being original yourself. So I just think that the situation with naming titles is a bit ridiculous. I think that anyone can use any title they want as long as they're not doing that and stealing a name and stealing the plot of, the actual story itself and the character names and whatnot. You can have a same title as another author and have a completely different book. And your readers will be smart enough to distinguish between the two. And if they're not, that's kind of their fault, isn't it? I mean, they had all the tools to do their own research, and apparently they didn't. So if they're confused and they get mad at you as an author, that's really on them, not on you. I know myself, I would be very upset if someone had the same title as me. However, I'll get over it because I know that that author is not writing the same book as I am. And if they are, then that's really what the issue is, not the title of our books. In the end, my opinion is that readers are smart, that titles can be the same and you can have 2 completely different books, and that you shouldn't really stake a claim on a name of a title unless it's something huge like Harry Potter. But those are just my 2 cents. I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. If you do leave a comment below, please be respectful in your comments and not bash any of the authors that I've mentioned or any other author or any other person at all. Please be respectful and treat others the way you would want to be treated in the comments below. And let's have a discussion about book titles and not who was right and who was wrong, because I don't think anyone was right in this situation personally. I think everyone could have handled it better ways, and none of these situations would have been blown up as much as they had been. So let's not discuss who was right and who was wrong. Let's discuss the situation and how the situations could have been better handled. Anyway guys, thanks for watching this video. It has been a blast talking about this. I've been wanting to talk about it for a while now. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend and space travels.